do that.
I can do it. Can you see how you do it? Okay, you got it. There you go.
Jane, one thing I'm going to ask you is for you to sort of read off the members of this subcommittee and the associated staffing that you've, if you could do that.
Yes, I can. If you give me 1 minute, I can do that.
Yeah,
I can be prepared.
I'm letting you know now so that
Thank
because
you.
otherwise I don't actually know for sure.
Yeah, go ahead. That sounds great. Hold on.
All right.
We are,
well,
our recording. Yeah, so I think we can go ahead.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for joining this first convening of the Just Transitions Subcommittee of the Vermont Climate Council. And today is Tuesday. I don't remember what day it is.
The 16th.
Thank you. 16th. No idea. And I'm Sue Minter, and at this moment, I'm one of the two co-chairs, along with, introduce yourself, Sarah.
I'm Sarah Phillips. I'm one of the co-chairs, and I work in the Department for Children and Families as the director of the Office of Economic Opportunity.
And I am a representative of the Vermont to the council I'm the executive director of Capstone Community Action, one of 5 anti-poverty organizations as a network in our state. And we were named as someone to represent the CAP network. It was named to be a member of the council. So that's who I'm representing. And because Sarah and I were designated co-chairs, we did speak over the weekend to develop this agenda, and I'd like to walk through it quickly and just make sure, first of all, if there are things missing or problematic in any way. And we're going to begin with introductions, and I'm going to focus specifically, although we have members of the public here, for now, we're going to focus on our subcommittee members, as well as the support staff from the administration that have been assigned to this group. And I wanted to, Sarah and I wanted to give a little time so we could actually debrief a little more on who we are, what we bring to this committee, and what our interests are. We thought it would be important at this first meeting to begin a process of goal setting, thinking about what is set forth in the law. We could also, I think, review the information that Jane forwarded to us today that really describes expectations of the committee, and maybe even share any personal aspirations for this committee that we each may have. And then we wanted to devote time to thinking about committee membership. And we can discuss later where we're at with that. And Jane, it might be helpful for you to sort of orient your thinking or the steering committee's thinking on how to do this. But irrespective of that, we thought, in addition to some of the criteria set forward in the documents Jane sent us a little while ago, we should have a bit of a discussion on sort of what we think is important to have represented, what perspectives might be important to have represented on this committee or subcommittee. And then maybe thinking about the identification of potentially an additional leader to the council, to the subcommittee, and then maybe talk about when we want to meet next. And we have left some time for public comment. So that's the agenda we've set forth. Are there any comments, concerns, additions, problems with that any of the subcommittee members wants to articulate? Great. Chris.
It's not a concern really, it's just with the goal setting. So you are talking, I think you said because we don't really have our committee membership, you're talking about just starting that conversation, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Just to begin, I mean, this is the first meeting, and I think what we're trying to do is get some ideas on the table that we can start with and grow from. At least that's what I'm thinking. And we'll just do it this way. Maybe this meeting, I'll try to facilitate, and then the next meeting, Sarah can facilitate. So it is 4:36. I would really love to hear from this subcommittee. And I wonder, Jane, if you could kind of list the names of the people who are currently on the subcommittee, as well as the staff that have been assigned. And then we're going to go around and have everyone share a little bit about themselves.
Sure, thanks, Sue. So the representation of counselors, staff participating in this subcommittee are Sue and Sarah, as well as Kelly Klein, Sean Brown, and Chris Campani. As well, you'll be staffed by, and I just want to make the comment that it maybe perhaps in haste of like everything moving at accelerated pace. Some of the staff, the agency staff who are here today, are gracious enough to be here, but are still sort of sussing out their complete roles with respect to this subcommittee, because many of them hadn't actually been told that they had been assigned to this subcommittee. So I appreciate sort of bearing with the process, because cabinet members nominated these staff to serve on this subcommittee, and they'll work through the process to ensure that their direct supervisors feel that they have this within their capacity right now. So from VDH, you have David Grass, Ross Mcdonald from VTrans, Carrie Hengstromberg from DEC, and Abby Willard from the Ag Agency. And I believe I saw all of them on the call, so I think they're all here for you today. And I'll let them speak to this as they go around, what expertise they bring, but I'll just put out there as of now, agency staff have been assigned to these committees with respect to providing both technical expertise as well as some administrative support. So I think that's well within the purview of the subcommittee yourselves to consider how and what roles you need from agency staff to support your work going forward.
Great, and I will just add to that list, for the purposes of this meeting anyway, Capstone has invited our staff, Amanda Carlson, I think I have that right, to help be here and take notes. And so I will just start out very quickly explaining who I am, what matters to me, why I'm here. So as the executive director of a community action agency, I think we are here to try to bring the lens of economic equity and empowerment to this discussion. At Capstone, we've really tried to build new programming around the issue of climate justice, and having a lot of time to very much explore some of the root causes of the disparity, the structural challenges we all face, while we in our organization, which is very multifaceted, actually try to provide services to move people out of poverty, to meet them in crisis and move them out of poverty. So I'm really pleased to bring the perspective of sort of boots on the ground, frontline, anti-poverty work and workers to the conversation. I have a background primarily in the public sector. I spent 20 years serving in various roles at the state. I worked for 10 years for ACCD in the community revitalization and community planning, where, among other things, I worked with Chris Campani, the regional planning directors. I served in the state legislature for 6 years on the Transportation Committee and Appropriations Committee. And then I've also served in the executive branch for 6 years, and serving as the deputy in the Transportation Agency, first as the deputy secretary and later as the secretary. And in the middle of that, 2011, we had Tropical Storm Irene, and I was deployed for almost 3 years to the statewide recovery, where I also worked with many people around this call. Many of you may know that I also ran for governor. And happily, someone else won that, so that there's another leader at this moment who's doing a terrific job in this crisis. And I have the incredible opportunity to work on changing the story with respect to economic inequality and disparity. So that's me. I'm really excited by this opportunity. I think it's hugely important. I think it's something we're really exploring as a state I think we have a lot of work to do and ground to cover in terms of where we start this conversation, and I look forward to very productive conversations as we proceed. So I will pass the torch to the next person who can then pass it on. So Sarah, I'll pass it to you.
Sure, thanks, Sue. So I did introduce myself, and I know many folks, but not others. So at the Office of Economic Opportunity, we are one of 6 divisions or units within the very large Department for Children and Families, within the very large Agency of Human Services. And our role at OEO is to administer programs and really work in partnership with community organizations to address issues of poverty around the state, so to work with local organizations. So we administer, in a non-COVID era, about $25 million annually in funding that goes to support about 50 different organizations in the state working to address issues of poverty locally. That includes actually the low-income weatherization program, so our office administers that program, and it's part of what has pulled me into this work. And it also includes core funding for our community action agencies around the state. So Sue and I have the privilege of working closely together through that work. And prior to being at the state, I actually worked at a community action agency at the previous version of the capstone. So I think what's interesting to me in this work, and what I'm sort of my deeper interest in participating on this committee, is really both an interest in the goals of the Climate Council, but really ensuring that low-income Vermonters and really disenfranchised Vermonters, our more marginal populations, have the opportunity to benefit from the work that will happen around the Climate Council, and to ensure that there's an equal seat at the table to make sure that their voices and their stories are really incorporated into the plans of the state. And then ultimately, I think, not just an eye towards equity in terms of ensuring that the decisions that are made and the policies and the programs that are put forward in the future don't just negatively impact those households, right, but also that they could have positive impact, right, and that we could bring these goals together around economic and racial and social justice together with the goals around climate justice, and that those go hand in hand. So I'm really excited to be on this committee and to see how we can bring those ideas together in a really specific policy and practical level. So I will hand it off to Chris. Excuse me if I don't get your last name quite right there. Is it Campani? Is that how you say that?
Campany, like company with an A.
Campani. Okay, great, Chris.
So let's see. So I'm the executive director of Wyndham Regional Planning Commission. We're the planning commission for Southeast Vermont. We serve 27 towns. And I just noticed as soon as I started talking, I started hearing hammers and drills. So just bear with me, as well as the vest behind me. I was asked to serve on the commission, on the council, representing a municipal perspective by then Speaker of the House, Mitzi Johnson. So that's how I came to be on the council. On this specific issue, I've always been dedicated to public service. When I graduated college, I was a presidential management intern at EPA, where I was there right when we were beginning the discussion about environmental justice and equity became a formal office within EPA. Was involved in that based on activity when I was in college in Mississippi around inequitable treatment of minority communities, especially in the siting of industrial facilities. And just, I don't know, throughout my life, it's just been a thread. I worked for years in the area of sustainable agriculture. Even when I was working on my master's in landscape architecture at LSU, I started a community food security group that also, in addition to food security, had a number of racial equity and justice aspects to it. working directly with the variety of communities, bringing them together, even bringing together the LSU, the land grant institution, along with the HBCU, Southern University, to have their ag programs work together. But one of the, and in sustainable agriculture, you know, one part of what I worked on was, I was really interested in sustainable ag because of the impact of agriculture on farming communities and equity and justice and farming communities, including the farm workers and everybody involved in the whole food chain. So after I left LSU, I went to, as a federal policy coordinator for the National Campaign for Sustainable Agriculture, worked on federal policy levels, and then I went back to work at planning. And in planning has been a tool for a lot of good and a lot of bad. If you know the history of planning, it's done a lot of good things in terms of being inclusive, and it's also done a lot of bad things. One of the things that was noted when we had, I forget the professor's name, he wrote a book about the aftermath of the 27 flood and its aftermath in Vermont. He noted that the first real planning activity in Vermont came after the flood, and that was the eugenics project, because Vermont was recognized as being a white state, and how can we make it even stronger and healthier by manipulating the state's gene pool. So, and then elsewhere in the world, you know, if you wanted to figure out where the historic black business and residential districts are, look for where the freeways run, because that tends to be the location. So part of my life has been to make sure that never happens again under my watch. And I'm a white male saying this, and frankly, this is a white problem that we've got to solve. Too often, to me, when you have these discussions, I think in policy levels, it's easy to say, let's have more inclusion at the front end, but it's almost like window dressing. The issues don't really get heard or dealt with. So part of what I want to really make sure that we take into account on this is how to make the policies as easy as possible for those who are going to be most affected by both the effects of climate change, especially flooding and natural disasters, and then also benefiting from programs that help us reduce greenhouse gas emissions. If you notice, oftentimes it's the programs that we have to make things more equitable that we make really difficult for the people who use those programs. Why do we put the burden on them of having to prove you don't have the resources that you need to access, as opposed to, you know, the other way around? So anyway, that's kind of a disjointed story. I really wasn't prepared to kind of go into background, but glad to be on here. I'm going to be doing a lot of listening. Not really. This is such a hard nut to crack. I think we're going to have a lot to learn about other groups who have gone before us, and even things that have nothing, of course, to do with climate change and resilience. I think just, you know, other successful movements where you've basically had to say, here's how we're living now, here's how we're going to have to live in order to have a viable future. So there are lots of things like that out there I think we can look at. I rambled on too long. There we go.
Thanks, Chris. Do you want to hand it to, or I can just pass it to Kelly, since
sure,
on my screen you're right below me.
Okay.
And I do want to mention, I had shortened change it, but we're sort of almost at the time that we're trying to move to the next topic. But let's keep going, because this is really, really important. Thanks.
Hi, happy to be here. So Kelly Klein, I'm the owner and CEO of Grunfell Meadery and Havoc Mead. We're based in St. Albans, Vermont. I am on the council as the representative of small businesses and small business owners. So that's sort of my official purpose on the council. My interest in this particular committee comes from, we're a certified B Corp, which means that we are committed to using our business as a force for good, that we're committed to doing our best for the environment and also for the people who live here. And I feel like this committee is a great combination of those two things. We're trying to do our best for the environment, but let's remember that we need to make sure that what we're doing is not going to be hurting people, especially those who have the least opportunity to speak up, and that we're being thoughtful about every decision we're making and all of the broader impacts on our communities. And so that's why I'm interested in this particular committee and glad to be a part of it. And I'm looking forward to the work we can do to work on making sure that we are doing the absolute best we can with working with helping the planet and helping people at the same time.
Great. So I know that Sean Brown is the other member, but I think, am I right, Sarah, that Jennifer is representing Sean? So Jennifer, would you like to share? Jennifer, I think you're muted.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Sorry, I don't always use my headphones. I'm not always sure if they work. So my name is Jennifer Micah. I'm general counsel for DCF as of September. And I don't want to say I made the mistake, but when Sean asked me if we would be interested in doing this, I jumped at the chance because I just care about the issue, as so many of us do. I'm not unusual in that respect. I have participated in a few climate change events. I'll just leave it at that. My background as a lawyer is working throughout AHS. Actually, I started in mental health and developmental disabilities, and then the department split up, and I went with the developmental disability side, and then eventually came back and did more mental health work, and now I'm at DCF. So I think that what I see in working with DCF is that a lot of what I learned about vulnerable populations really is throughout similar issues for so many people, regardless of whatever is causing you temporary problems in your life. It's so I think that I bring that sort of broader perspective around people living out far away from services, and how do we deal with transportation and things like that. So that's what I'm hoping to bring to this, in addition to just being really interested in the topic. And I did, just so you know, I did reach out to Susanna Davis, who she didn't get my email, so I resent it, just touched base with her, and she wanted to do the survey if she still could. I think that has closed, but and she's interested in trying to get some more people on this committee. She was going to send out some information about that. So just FYI. That's it for me. Thank you.
Great. And you also bring legal skills to the table, which is always helpful. Jane, maybe I'll leave it to you to introduce yourself and the other sort of staff from the administration.
Well, I'm happy to introduce myself, but I might ask, since I don't know them all personally, that they just do a quick update on their roles within their respective agencies. So I am a newly hired director of the Global Warming Solutions Act is my new title, and I'm still trying to suss out what I do, besides perhaps coming to 5,000 meetings and learning what you all do, which is a real privilege to get engaged and up to speed on the work that so many people are doing throughout the state on so many important issues. So I come from actually a public land background, and I have worked at Fish and Wildlife overseeing our land acquisition and public land management program for 15 years. In that role, I worked really closely with Secretary Moore on a lot of very big and complicated projects, none as big and complicated and ambitious as the Climate Action Plan, but hopefully she saw something in me when she reached out and asked me to work with her on this. So I am really excited to step up and step in and start to figure out how best I can support both the Climate Council as well as all of your work, which I expect to be ambitious and fast-paced over the next few months, with the idea of strategies and pathways being developed by June to meet the timeline. And I look forward to talking about the specific charge in front of this committee, because this committee in particular, I think, will help set the pace and stage and see if it's even possible to sort of meet those ambitious deadlines and have something that feels just and transparent and equitable, because this work takes time. And so I'm interested to learn from all of you and work closely with you. So I'll let the other agency staff speak to their roles and what perspectives they bring to this work.
Well, how about we start with David, with whom I worked a long time ago after Irene, and I was part of, Vermont was part of a national Obama White House, what was it called? Task force on climate resilience. And so the engagement of the health department was really foremost on our efforts there. Go ahead, David.
Hi, Sue. It's nice to see you. My name is David Grass. I'm an environmental health scientist working with the health department. Normally, I oversee programs such as environmental public health tracking and climate and health, where we've been working for the last 7 years to document health impacts of climate change in Vermont and devise adaptation strategies to minimize those impacts. The tracking program tries to identify environmentally attributable diseases in Vermont and devise public health actions to minimize those diseases. For the last year, I've been deployed to the COVID-19 response as Deputy Director for the Epidemiology Branch, which has been quite a responsibility. We have more than 200 people on our team, and it's allowed me to work very closely as a liaison to city governments such as Burlington and Winooski, where we've had community outbreaks. The health department has always prided itself on putting health equity front and center, but over the last year, I've learned how much I don't know about health equity and how much farther we have to go in order to accomplish health equity. The health disparities that have been in evidence over the last year in Vermont around COVID-19, are nothing short of criminal. So, we need to do a lot better and get our house in order. I've worked on issues of the health impacts of climate change, throughout my professional career, and see them as being orders of magnitude bigger than just COVID-19. It's really important work, and we need to make sure we do it right. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Next on my screen, I see Abby, with whom I'm on another task force around food security and the Everyone Eats program right now. Thanks, Abby.
You're welcome. Hi, everyone. My name is Abby Willard. I am the director of the Ag Development Division at the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. I think that my role will be sharing a little bit about the project that I have been engaged in as part of the Vermont Certified Public Managers Program, which has been working with Carrie and others at DEC around environmental justice activities for their permitting programs and various program processes. That project came to be something that I engaged in as we look at, my work is primarily around local food production, promotion, engaging with the agricultural community, and thinking about how to ensure that the local food movement is not an elitist movement only for those that can afford to pay top dollar price for local food. Over the past year, have led, along with other very talented people at our agency, what we call VCAP, which has been our Vermont COVID-19 Agricultural Assistance Program. So where we've invested $26.5 million in the ag and food sector to help them kind of recover during the pandemic, and leading some of our DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion work at the Agency of Agriculture, sort of acknowledging that there's a lot of work to do in the ag sector in these topics and conversations, and really feel that there's a wonderful interplay between diversity, equity work and environmental justice. So really excited to sort of hear what all of you think on this topic and be as supportive as I can.
Thank you. I think I saw Ross Mcdonald, who I worked with at VTrans. Are you with us?
I am. Hello, everybody. Ross McDonald. I'm the Public Transit Program Manager at VTrans. We have 7 providers in regional organizations around the state performing over 5 million trips. Most of those for those who need the transportation, not making a choice to use that transportation. So we're right in the equity industry and human services role. And I'm looking forward to, as President of Peachum Community Housing on Planning Commission, my past experience with EPA in New Jersey, where environmental justice was an important aspect of program development, project development. This is exciting to serve this council, and we'll share the data, support, and looking forward to seeing what we can do together. But thanks for having me.
Nice. And I think from DEC, is it Carrie?
Yeah, hi, I'm Carrie Hengstenberg. I think our connection, Sue, might be that I live in Waterbury. So there's that. Yeah, so I'm the planning manager at the DEC. I've been working at the DEC for almost 20 years, and my background was in hydrogeology and waste management. I used to do the review and permitting of waste facilities and compost facilities. But in this role as the planning manager, I kind of do a lot of things that nobody else does, but have to get done. So I do our strategic planning, performance accountability, like fees. Yeah. And then I also I'm the director of our Eco AmeriCorps program. So we have a 24-member AmeriCorps program that runs out of DEC with 24 members serving around the state, doing various kind of community science programs, clean water work, and waste reduction work. And then one of my job duties is I'm the liaison with the EPA programmatically for all the funding that we get for them. And that's how a couple of years ago I stumbled across this role of becoming the environmental justice coordinator for the DEC, because we didn't have one and we weren't really engaged in that work at all. So we've been working on it for about 2 years. We have a team, and we meet regularly, and we're trying to move forward on developing an environmental justice policy for the DEC, which opened our eyes to a lot of stuff around civil rights compliance and language access, and just our overall not great relationships with communities, like a real disconnect. So, you know, if anything, we kind of came in like really excited, you know, we're going to do this and we're going to engage with all these communities. And, you know, we're just finding that the type of work that needs to happen is slow. And there's just so many people who are behind and have different concerns other than the ones we have. So that's kind of been a challenging sort of thing. I also have been around the climate change wheelhouse at ANR for a while. I was on the original climate change team under the Douglas administration, providing support to the Climate Collaborative. And then I also worked as a staff facilitator for the Climate Action Commission. So I guess I would say maybe the strengths that I would bring to this team is I am like one of the state green belts and a project manager, and I really am an implementer and a process person. So that's
great.
Me.
Yeah, and you bring our state environmental justice program to this. What a terrific gathering of perspectives and talents and life experience. And as much as we are missing a lot, we have a lot here, it seems. I want to recognize Amanda, who works with Capstone, who's going to help us. Amanda, do you want to say hi? Maybe she's here.
Hello, all. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, I work with Sue at Capstone. I started with Capstone in their weatherization department and kind of have recently transitioned to helping on the Climate Council, helping on this new transportation program, and then still doing some work in weatherization. I grew up in rural Vermont and have had a lot of different jobs. I've worked in the medical field recently, so I think I can bring some interesting perspectives from various different work experiences I've had since finishing college. Thanks.
Great. All right. It is now a little after 5. We're going to move on. And we want to just sort of talk about goal setting. Now, Sarah and I developed this agenda before receiving, Jane, the document, or maybe it had been presented to us, but I hadn't really put my mind on it anyway. I don't know if it might make sense for you to even sort of orient us to that document by sharing the screen or just talking through it a little bit. This document, I'm not sure what it's called, but it basically talks about sort of the task of each committee, subcommittee.
Yeah, so thank you for acknowledging that, and I'm sorry that everything's coming, especially as the first subcommittee meeting to you at the 11th hour. But so the descriptions, and I'm happy to share I can just share it while I start talking so you can be reading along. You guys all see? Sue, I think you're muted.
It's a little small, but I'm sure you can talk us through it and we can see it and we can read it in our email later. That's perfect. Yeah.
Okay, so, and I can scroll in a minute, but so there a couple at the last full Vermont Climate Council meeting, there was the Word document shared with the council entitled the Draft Process Roadmap. And that was sort of a lengthy document to put words to some presentations and contextual slides that had been shared with the council at previous meetings. And this was drafted by our facilitator after a lot of interaction with both Secretary Young and Secretary Moore around process that they saw based on the language being pulled out of the legislation. And so what you're seeing in front of you now is some work that I did over the weekend after having a lot of dialogue with Secretary Moore around trying to sort of beef up the language within that draft process roadmap to provide to the subcommittees ahead of their first meetings to think about what the charge is and in front of them as a subcommittee, and then to put some milestones and timelines in front of you all as you start to venture upon what is a pretty short timeline for an ambitious amount of work. So for your subcommittee, there was actually quite a bit of language in the actual law. And most of what you're seeing here is that direct language from the law. Not all the subcommittees had as much sort of background and language embedded in the law itself, but your committee did. And so a lot of what you're seeing here is just that language pulled into a document for you to easily digest and understand what the charge is as it pertains to the law. And then I'll draw your attention to a few other bullets that I added, but the core set of the work as envisioned in the context of the law, of course, you're free to really think about this and challenge what's in front of you as a group. And I think that's well within your scope of work, but is really to set up and first tasked with the idea of putting forward a set of principles, for lack of better terminology, that all of the strategies and policies that come out of the other subcommittees can use as a test to determine how fair and equitable they are when they go forward and being implemented. So that was sort of the core principle of the work that you were set out to do. Within that, I suggested through work with Secretary Young and Susanna, as someone else mentioned, as well as Julie, that there is an impact assessment tool that has been developed by Susanna for policy work. And I just referenced that here because I don't think you have to start from scratch. I'm sure people have other ideas and of places to start, but that equity impact assessment tool, which I believe I shared with your whole committee, if not just with Sue and Sarah, is a good starting place to think about principles, but I'll just table that for now. Further beyond that set of principles, an assessment tool, I really see your committee, as I imagine Sue does and Sarah, in service to the other committees. And so as you think about your own work, it's also important to recognize that there might be roles for you all to embed yourselves in other subcommittees so that you're not brought in too late, or you're there to really be a sounding board for them on these important issues. And then I just want to also draw your attention within this document that was sent around, that at the end, I tried to put words to the timeline that is in front of everybody, all these subcommittees. And so there's a recognition that that today you'll start to process all of this information, digest the nominations, and then we expect that the process for nominations may take another 2 weeks because of the sheer volume of nominations. And that doesn't have to be independent of this moving forward and advancing the work of the subcommittee. We see it as in tandem. You have council members here, you have agency staff to support you, and the additional membership can sort of be a work in progress over the next 2 weeks. And so that there was an email that I sent out trying to outline a proposed process for nominations and how to vet that. That was sent to the full council today and will be vetted by the council steering committee tomorrow prior to being distributed to the subcommittees. But I'm happy to walk through these milestones, but I also want to just wanted to draw your attention to them at this point and allow you to sort of go back and think about the goal setting that you were just discussing.
Thank you.
Happy to stop sharing too, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. And people do have it in their emails. And we do have, right after we talk about goal setting, we'll talk about sort of committee membership. And I think it'd be helpful for you to review the process that you kind of are proposing at that time. So, you know, I guess I'm interested in what some of the goals, Jane has set forth goals that are sort of a digestion of the act. And I think I saw, but you didn't mention, but I do want to mention because I happen to think it's really important that we have a particular responsibility and engagement with the public engagement process. And that might really be a very important point to our work. And I know it was in the document that I scanned earlier, so I just wanted to put it out there before it got forgotten. So I just want to open the floor to any thoughts that people might have reflecting as they have had or not necessarily had a chance to digest, but also just what's on your mind. I, of course, have lots of ideas, but I'm not going to start. So any thoughts from the group? And I guess just jump in or raise your hand. Maybe it's too big of a question.
It's a pretty big question.
I know, but we don't have to answer it. The idea is we put some ideas on the wall right now that we're thinking about. I'll just start by kind of saying, starting with, I do think that the public outreach and engagement is really important, and as important as the idea of embedding perhaps us into other committees. It's actually, I think, bringing especially underrepresented communities into a conversation about which many communities have been very far from engaging in and haven't been asked. So that feels front and center for me. I like the idea of principles and sort of trying to develop a way of thinking. I'm not confident that we're going to be able to come up with the be all and end all of those, and interested in the kinds of scans I did look at the equity impact assessment, and I think it in particular has a very important focus on race. And I think that's hugely important, as well as other aspects of engagement or disparity that we want to think through. Go ahead, Chris.
One other piece of this is, and I'm not sure how to characterize this exactly, but you know, we're talking here about the current generation of Vermonters, and of course, I'm using the term Vermonters broadly. By Vermonters, I mean anybody residing here. And when you know, VPR even did a whole series, right, on what is a Vermonter and the tensions there. And I think that's one of the questions we're going to have the council deal with is the people who are currently here. I think we actually look forward to, you know, current but also future generations. But then also, frankly, the likelihood, and this is something I've been bringing up in a variety of different venues, is new people coming here. You know, we've seen a surge of people generally who have the means to move here during the pandemic, but you know, with flooding of, you know, especially coastal, the research shows that people, if you get displaced, you tend to stay in the same region. So like my experience, it was indirect, but with Katrina, you know, people still generally stayed in that Gulf region after they left New Orleans. People still generally stayed in like the Gulf region when they got displaced from Mississippi. And if we look at how people are ultimately going to be displaced by climate change in coastal New England and the Northeast for a variety of different reasons, you know, I think we're going to see more people coming to Vermont, both out of desire and then also out of necessity. And it's just a factor in the as we have the conversations about how we achieve what the act says we're going to achieve. I think we just have to take into account new arrivals. I'm not exactly sure what to do with that as far as the council's concerned, but I think Vermont has not seen a whole lot of growth. In fact, you know, that's been a perpetual discussion about how do we recruit. So there are definitely some opportunities here. But, you know, my experience when I was Deputy Commissioner Planning for Orange County, New York after 9/11, as communities began to grow, and here's where we get into this nexus with planning and all, immediately you see suspicion about who's moving here, who might move here, and what can we do basically to keep them out. And I think that's kind of that wasn't unique to New York. I've seen it in everywhere that I've been that's seen growth. Oftentimes when we start talking about growth, it's not what do we want to see here, but who do we want to see here? And I think that's going to be a hard conversation potentially for Vermonters to have, because we're not used to having those kinds of discussions. And anyway, just wanted to bring that issue up. We don't have to do anything about it right now. Just wanted to bring it up as something that we may need to consider how to deal with.
Thanks. Jane, I don't know if you have your hand up. I see it up.
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to thank you for bringing up the public engagement and just echo actually how critical and important that role is of this committee, especially in sort of ground truthing how robust and what is necessary for public engagement around and with the milestones and timing. I think that's sort of going to be an early need for this group to suggest how real those milestones can be if we want robust public engagement and what that will mean, especially for more disenfranchised and marginal communities, and how to successfully reach those folks. And so I'll just suggest that of the tasks, and I'm now realizing I just sent you all as a subcommittee the email that Sue got as a Vermont Climate Council counselor, but not all of you got that. I'm starting to understand who's on what email lists that people have shared with me. And so in the future, I'll do a better job of when I send the Vermont Climate Council an email, I'll also copy all of the subcommittees. So you're now getting all correspondence, but you now have that in your email so you can reference these documents. And I'll just highlight that at the end of that email, it also suggests that while you may not get to finalizing your nominations and memberships for next Monday's climate meeting. That one idea is the idea that you'll come as a counselor, as co-chairs to that meeting, prepared to talk about what the task is in front of you and how you'll meet that with respect to the milestones set forward for all of all of the subcommittee groups to present on that and have a robust dialogue about the work in front of you all.
I just want to reflect on that, Jane, to say I feel that there's a lot of concern about the milestones set forth in the Act, and there's a lot of concern that we don't slow down. And so I hear both sides of that. And I certainly do not believe personally that we can possibly do a robust public engagement process in advance of, a year from now. However, I do believe that the process of engaging particularly new communities into this conversation isn't something that's going to begin and be completed in this time, but in fact, to grow more deeply and to find more ways to engage. So, I'm not particularly excited to come to the meeting on Monday suggesting that we don't think we can do it on that timeline. And I'm willing to talk about a process, but I feel like there's this push about the timeline, and I think that the goals are extremely aggressive. But I don't want to start by saying we can't do it. I want to start by advancing the ball as quickly and as thoughtfully as possible.
And I hope I didn't mean to imply that, because the suggestion just means a recognition of what public engagement would mean to meet these timelines. And I think the way you just framed it around, it's just the start of building out. And that's, I would encourage, I spoke to the Massachusetts folks after this, they've been at this for 15 years. And they kind of thought about their first climate plan as with particular notice to this issue as not doing a great job, but they did just that. They built the infrastructure to continue the dialogue and can further out the conversation to bring more and more people into the dialogue. So I think that was well said, and I appreciate the way you reframed it, not as like a failure to meet the milestones, but what will be needed ongoing to ensure a full participation by Vermonters in this process.
To the degree we can figure that out. Any other thoughts again about sort of this idea of a screen of principles that we tried to use to assess the policies or ideas that evolve from the other committees, that we are sort of in service to the other committees with those principles and that lens in mind. Any thoughts about that? Does that resonate, make sense, or does it sound too wonky? Go ahead, Kelly.
I don't know if I should just chime in or raise my hand. I agree. I think that there's going to be a lot that we need to assess, and we can probably do this by first helping to create some principles, sharing those with the other committees so that they're keeping them in the front of their mind as they work on developing the actual policies and things, and then also using those principles to evaluate things at milestones. I think that makes a lot of sense. And excuse me, I'm talking right now. Being interrupted by a screaming 3-year-old. Sorry about that.
That's joyful.
It is joyful. Lost my train of thought. Yes, principles, I love that. And then as far as public engagement, I was just thinking as well that a first step might be to try to identify community leaders and stakeholders and things like that, or if there is not a leader in a certain area, trying to identify a group of people who sort of are de facto leaders in their communities, just as opposed to not opposed to, but in addition to sort of saying, come one, come all, please tell us your thoughts, but specifically looking for communities that we want to get feedback from and going out to leaders and stakeholders in those communities.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to reflect back that what I heard from Secretary Moore, I recall, is that they either are about to, Jane, you can update us, either about to or have already maybe put out like an RFP or an RFI around public engagement. And my hope would be that we would, as a committee, be able to either help participate in that process of selection, or once it's selected, really work on the strategies. I think you're talking, Kelly, about strategies and tactics, and there's a lot of discussion we could have around that, and I'm sure tons of experience around the room. I saw Carrie raised her hand, but Jane, is that RFP out or soon to go out, or do you know?
Yeah, so it's soon to go out. It was just finalized, and that's an RFP. I assume you're speaking to the RFP for communications, because we don't have an RFP for public engagement, but we have an RFP for land for help with outreach and communications around the whole Climate Council work. And I imagine that a very big component of it is around the public engagement.
Sue, we have one. I think that maybe that's what Secretary Moore was talking about.
We have one, what?
In the DEC, we're writing an RFP for for public engagement with communities who are vulnerable to environmental injustices.
Yeah, well, and Secretary Moore, you're right. So we have an RFP for the Climate Council work around communications and outreach. But Carrie, thank you for bringing that up, because Secretary Moore has suggested that somehow that outreach that DEC is doing should be tied to this work, largely because we're going to reach out to the same communities and we're going to ask them these questions, and it's going to be hard for them to separate the issues, since they're to many people will be one and the same, of like the climate work and DEC's mission. So they're not the same, but I understand from Julie that we should coordinate on them.
Well, that's really great to have both sets of opportunities. And I'm going to put forth, I have a feeling this is a deep topic about which we may want to establish a work group of sorts, because it's all, because I think, whether if they are different teams, how they work together and helping to see all of that might just be an idea. I don't know if anybody has an agreement with that. I'm conscious of the fact that it's 5:30, and I think I want to just take final thoughts about sort of goals or aspirations we've sort of put forward, thanks to Jane. The idea that we establish some principles. I think that the other states have done similar things, so my guess is we'll be able to cull what they're doing and see what works for us in addition to our own ideas. And then the issue of the public engagement process, I think, is really key. Are there any final thoughts on that sort of topic?
I was about to type it in, it's maybe faster. Do we need to define some terms here at some point, like what does it mean to not unfairly burden any groups? And what does accessibility to incentives for building resilience, what does that accessibility mean? Because if we're going to provide guidance to others, it just seems like we may have to understand what we mean by some of these. Are there some terms that we need to define and have an understanding of ourselves, and make sure the full council has that same understanding? I guess that's more of a question than a suggestion.
Well, I think that, go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I was just going to, that's great, Francis, to just kind of, for us to hold space for just having a shared understanding of language and what we mean when we use certain, that seems very fundamental in terms of pushing out principles that we want to guide the other subcommittees. So that's probably a great starting place for us, and certainly we're not going to have to start from scratch on that. And I'm seeing some great things popping up in the chat box around some different resources and different tactical ideas and things we want to make sure. So I imagine that'll be in future, very soon, meetings of this subcommittee, that those seem like great things for us to dive into next.
Yeah, again, I have this feeling there's some work groups we're going to need to do, but I frankly am not interested in setting forward work groups until we have a full council or subcommittee members, because the folks that we need to bring here are different from the people at this on this call. I feel like, Chris, just to follow up, maybe you can start to think about those terms. I think it's a great point and really important. I think it would be helpful to just turn our attention for the next, let's say, 15 minutes to membership. And I'm kind of relieved that we're not expected at this meeting to figure it all out, and that you all are thinking about a process. Jane, can you help review what it is you're thinking at this point? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so in recognition that we didn't get the survey, the survey closed as of Friday evening. That was the second survey, to remind folks, that went out, and the intent of this survey was to reach broader Vermonters than what the last one, which was more a targeted audience that the council directed their nominations through. So this was intended to reach broad constituents across the state. People put it out to their networks. It was forwarded. It was made public. And we received just under, it's about 260 nominations this time around, in addition to the more than 100 we had from the last round. So there's roughly 350 nominations now to be vetted by the subcommittees. And if you saw my email, which not all of you did, I also recognized there was a shortcoming in this survey where if people were nominated specifically to serve on a subcommittee in particular, that was embedded in the comments section, and it was not pulled out within its own sort of column to sort by. And so when I went through today and spent some time reading all the comments in order to enable a new column to sort the nominations by the particular subcommittees that they asked to be on, only not even a quarter of nominees actually specified what subcommittee they would like to be on. Many just listed their expertise and said that they were excited to participate in any subcommittee. So it made the work that much harder in front of the subcommittees to select nominees. And so I'll just remind you that there's 5 people already officially nominated to this committee. In addition, you have agency staff supporting you. And we're striving for 8 to 10 subcommittee membership with no more than 12. We're trying to keep these groups small and nimble. Again, there's this thought that there'll be concentric circles of participation, and perhaps you may allow for larger membership through work groups if you determine that work groups are important. So our idea was that you have all of the nominees as of today. You can start to process the people in front of you. And for some reason, the ones who did articulate a subcommittee to serve on, actually, many of those that did articulate were speaking to the Just Transitions Committee. And so you'll see if I noted of particular interest to the Just Transitions Committee on the spreadsheet. Tomorrow, we'll review the idea of a timeline and process for determining subcommittee membership with the steering committee of the Vermont Climate Council. And then I'll move forward pretty quickly to share with you all by Thursday or Friday of this week a Google form, likely, where you will have all of the names in the form and you'll rank them. And then and we haven't vetted exactly how we'll do that yet, whether it's simply high, medium, low with respect to the value that they would bring to your subcommittee, of which we'll be discussing with the steering committee tomorrow, clear criteria for how you make selections and approve folks for your subcommittee. And those right now, the consideration for criteria really has to do with geographic diversity. We've heard a lot of comments about counselors being largely on the interstate corridors, the relevant experience of their work, and relevant experience to fill with particularly to gaps on your subcommittee right now. We'd love to see more diversity based on BIPOC, age, income, and then make sure it isn't redundant with existing council subcommittee membership by organization or interest. So you'll get this Google form that will ask you all to rank the nominees within. You'll get that ranking back to you early next week, likely on Monday. And then your subcommittee will need to meet again to sort of vet the nominees with particular interest to your subcommittee and how they sort of came out with respect to high, medium, and low. And I imagine you'll only look at the ones that ranked high in some regard, whether it's numerical or just generically high, medium, and low. And then the expectation is by next Friday, the 26th, you will have your subcommittee membership ironed out. Clear as can be, I'm sure. You're muted, Sue, so thanks.
Thanks. I wanted to just add a few elements that I had raised at the council, just the very strong feeling that we need to diversify by race and ability. There's a lot of diversity that we lack in this group, and that as we build out, that we try to not replicate sort of the white, I guess we're predominantly female, Chris. Actually, there's David and Ross. So maybe we're more mixed gender than I thought. But age and geographic region, all of those. But I also feel really strongly about the leadership. So, you know, Sarah and I have both talked about wanting to encourage, in fact, really require that a member of the BIPOC community be a leader in this just transition. And I think the council agreed to do that, and that could happen by possibly me stepping down or having 3 people sort of be, and I don't know if you call it isn't it tri? But anyway, tri leaders. So I did want to hear anybody's thoughts about that.
I'll jump in. I'm in favor of having a member of the BIPOC community be one of the chairs of the committee. I think if you guys think you can work with 3 together, that's great. One thing I wanted to float is that would come with an extra amount of work for somebody. So someone who may be happy to be on the committee might not be able to be a chair. And so just as we're looking through this process in a very short amount of time, trying to identify a candidate or candidates quickly, and then making sure that the person we are asking is really going to be able to say yes. So just how that process will work, I don't have answers, just raising that as something we should be thinking about sooner rather than later.
Right. It sounds like the first screening we are going to do of the 160, well, to 300 some odd people will be essentially done for us. You're going to, are you going to, Jane, send us the sort of the folks who have at least identified just transitions? Or are you going to send us just the whole?
You have the whole list right now. And there was no way to only send you the just transitions ones because I think there are people in there who would be apt to serve on any of them. So and then you have some highlighted, but.
Okay, so we all have that in our inbox, and we will have a screening tool. Did you say?
Yes.
Okay.
That will be provided on Thursday or Friday this week.
And then there's this question, and I do want to mention also that every member of this committee is, I believe, going to be authorized to receive per diems. Yes. And for folks, I know that I've offered to donate our per diem toward another person who might take on the role of co-chairing or tri-chairing. Mm-hmm. So I just want that to somehow be known. And if anyone listening in and participating as a member of the public are interested, I want to make sure you know that. Is there any way, Jane, that we can identify if someone's, to Kelly's point, actually has time and interest in chairing? How would we even do that?
I think it's going to be the same way that you deal with subcommittee members. I mean, there's going to have to be, once you have put forward your final list of 8 to 12 to the council, I expect that final list will also have had some due diligence done in the background to ensure that these people who were nominated know they were nominated and that they have the time, whether to serve as a member of the subcommittee or in a form of a chair. And I think that's the responsibility of the subcommittee co-chairs to vet those folks and their availability.
Okay. So one idea that Sarah and I discussed, and I was sort of thinking we didn't have to. I see a hand. Is you?
Abby.
Sue, hi, it's Abby. Yeah.
Why is it you?
Is that how it looks?
Your bubble says you.
Oh, weird.
Okay, Abby.
I'll have to check. Normally it doesn't say that. I just wanted at some point just some clarity for those of us as supporting staff of the role that you want us to play in the membership process. So I didn't mean to disrupt the flow, but just either in email or in chat, just let us know the role that you want us to play as non-official committee members.
Well, what I was going to suggest is a process of reconvening on Friday, if possible. So that we might have between now and then to look through the list. And to your point, we would then have a week to further digest. And what might be helpful for staff is to help with that and sort of point out, maybe color code, hey, these are the folks who either have self-identified as interested in your committee or we think based on what I'm seeing might be good on this subcommittee. So that kind of first screen would be lovely. And then also I'm thinking if we're lucky enough to meet again on Friday, we might be able to divvy out so that people might have conversations or email conversations with 5 or more people. And if there's 5 of us doing 5, we could maybe divide it up that way, depending on how many. That's just a process that I'm thinking about so that by the time we reconvene again in a week from now, we might have a little more information. Mm-hmm. But let me ask this question. Can the council members, first and foremost, and any staff as well, meet on Friday afternoon? Sarah, did you have a time in mind? I remember you saying, Sarah. Did we have a time in mind?
Yeah, sorry about that. I am available after 3 on Friday.
And by the way, I'm not able to, for some reason, see the chat right now. I think it's just that I'm a little bit too busy trying to see everybody. So can I just see if there's anyone, raise your hand if you are a council member or a staff to the council and cannot join on Friday after 3, maybe between 3 and 5.
There's another subcommittee meeting from 4 to 5, so I'm available from 3 to 4 to join you, but not 4 to 5.
Okay, and maybe we won't need to be on 2 hours. Let's give it an hour and a half. I think the idea of an hour and a half meeting is maximum. So I'm not seeing speak now or forever hold your peace. Great. Okay, I see even a thumbs up. So we will convene. Abby, Jane, can you help formalize that I think that has to be publicly warned. And I just wanted to ask if you could do that. And I don't know if it's you or Melissa who will do that, but just that we will meet. And as long as everyone's comfortable, Sarah and I can kind of figure out an agenda. And I think the main point, go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, Abby's saying she can only do 4 to 5, and I know Jane can do 3 to 4. So I'm not sure how we want to proceed there. I think the goal on Friday's meeting, it sounds like the goal for Friday's meeting would be look more specifically at the list of possible subcommittee members and assign folks to hopefully reach out to people to have conversations. And at that point, we'll know the screening criteria. So that's the goal for Friday's meeting. Okay. It might be great then to have Abby, if I can suggest that, and maybe, maybe there's a way, maybe we could even do, if we can grab a little bit of Jane's time before she jumps into the other subcommittee meeting. So perhaps we could start at like 3:30 and go 3:30 to 5, and that way we have Abby for the chunk of it. Okay.
Love that idea. 3:30 to 5 on Friday. And Abby, and any other staffers, do you think you have a little time and ability to do a pre-screen almost of like, help us see the people that are obviously already identified for this and more? I don't know whether you have time for that. It might be very helpful, or if anyone does.
I just want to echo that I in my note to you all, our director of communications is not in today, and my hope is she sent me all the raw survey data, and my hope is that I'm somehow missing something, because I couldn't believe that I couldn't sort by a subcommittee, because I thought that was one of our questions, was if you want to serve on a subcommittee, I click down which one, and that's not shown on the Excel data that I got in raw form. So I noted in my email that I didn't want to not share with everybody the nominations, but my hope is that I will be able to further refine the data so that you aren't reviewing 365 nominations, you're reviewing the 100 or 75 who thought that they might have value for this subcommittee. So I will have an answer for that tomorrow, and that will hopefully inform the process that you all need to go through with review of the nominations.
Jane,
go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, sorry. I'm not great at the raising my hand thing. I'm trying. It's important. So yeah, Jane, I'm also sorry. I just pulled up what you sent, and the first round nominees are a lot of folks that it looked like someone else put their name forward, but no one's ever talked to that person. And also just curious, that first round of nominees, if like folks who have already been assigned to subcommittees have been reviewed, or where we're at with that, so that.
Right, none of those people have been vetted for a subcommittee yet. The only people on subcommittees are counselors right now. Okay. So none of the first round or the second round have been vetted. And
counselors or counselor designees too.
Yes, thank you.
It's almost 5:50 when we announced public comment, and I just want to kind of try to close and summarize. But before so doing, I think we have to set up our Friday meeting as well as potentially meeting again next week at this time. So can I just check whether that's a problem for anyone? And again, I'm not able to sort of follow all the chats. Unless someone speaks now, we'll set that in motion as well. And that'll give us 2 meetings before we have to sort of finalize. Terrific. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming around this table. And I also want to say, wow, 300 and some odd people. Of course, right now we're like, oh my gosh, how are we going to narrow that? But guess what? Those are the next concentric circle of people who will be involved in this process. It may be not on this subcommittee, but in a very real process. So I don't want I want us to make sure that anyone who put forth their name or the name of someone else is recognized as, the next circle out of being involved. Okay, any other comments or thoughts from the subcommittee members and staff before we turn it over to any interested public comment? Is that RM? I see RM and CH. CH. Go ahead.
I just had a quick comment about
Gary.
figuring out your the additional subcommittee assignments, that would be helpful. Like, even if I had time to go through, I wouldn't know what I was looking for. So it seems like the committee needs to talk about kind of what traits, what identities, what skills, what representation you'd be looking for.
Thank you. And that was actually the purpose that we we had put on the agenda. So what I want to suggest is that everyone give that the entire meeting on Friday is going to be devoted to this. And we're going to begin with our own thoughts on that. So I want everyone to write down between now and then what it is they think are the most important attributes that we need to bring to this group that are missing. And how about that as a process point? Thank you, Carrie. Did anyone else have a comment before we ask the public to share their thoughts? All right, again, thank you for participating in the very first subcommittee meeting of the Just Transitions Subcommittee of the Climate Council. And we do have 10 minutes. If you are a member of the public joining us, we welcome you to share any thoughts you might have. And we have 10 minutes for that. All right, well, I guess that means people are interested in what we're saying, and we're glad you are around the circle, and we will welcome your comments on Friday as well. And this is obviously interesting and new and moving quickly, but I really appreciate everybody's time, attention, and dedication to this important topic. Anything else, Sarah, you want to share?
No, that's great. I just want to say thanks, Sue, for jumping in to share this first subcommittee meeting, and really looking forward to working with this group and digging into the meat of it a little bit. And Sue and I will do our best to try and help lay out a process in these meetings that will help us cover a range of topics. So if you have thoughts about that, I would just also invite those ahead of, I think we have an idea for what Friday's meeting is focused on, but if you have thoughts about process or how to make these meetings be as effective as possible, I would just open up and welcome that as well.
And I want to remember, and I want to appreciate and acknowledge Jane and thank you for all the work you're doing to try to get us going, jumping in. But you did also mention, and I want to just point out before we forget, that on Monday, Sarah and I are going to be expected to share with the council a few things, including, I think you asked Jane, our thoughts on the public engagement process and the timeline. So we might want to sort of bookmark some time for Friday to reflect on that together. And anything else, please feel free to email. And great. And Sarah's going to chair the next meeting, which I know she's very, very good at. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening. Stay safe.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Good night.
Good night.